Hey everyone, Pastor Caleb here with another answer to a question from our Question and Answer Sunday. Somebody asked, what does the Bible say about minimalism? So if you don't understand the term minimalism, it's kind of a fad, I guess, sort of right now. The idea is to have as few things as possible, or to have things that are very multi-use. The idea is like you just keep as much clutter out of your life as possible, as few things as you need. Therefore, you're relatively nimble if you need to move or do something like this. It also means that as far as your mind is concerned, there's some science behind this too, that like you're just less distracted. You have a clearer thought pattern if there's fewer things just around you all the time. So what does the Bible have to say about that? Maybe you remember the TV show, Netflix show with Marie Kondo, and the idea was like, you look at each thing and decide, does this spark joy in my life? And that's kind of like a way to think about minimalism. So I'm a minimalist insofar as like I look at an item and I say, does this spark joy in my life? A couple problems with that, and nothing against Marie Kondo, but as far as from a biblical perspective, we have to think about these things this way. There are a lot of things that spark a positive feeling in me. That doesn't mean that those things are inherently good, right? So like somebody looks at pornography, they're going to get a good feeling. That doesn't mean that pornography is inherently good. So just the basic premise that you could look at something and decide whether it sparks joy in your life as a reason to keep it, that's not really a good metric for whether you should keep something or not. Another thing is that God gives us a different type of joy than the world talks about when it talks about joy. Do you remember this if you watched my Christmas Eve message? When we think of joy, we think of like exuberance or even positive feelings. And the Bible would talk about joy as more like comfort, like your underlying foundation, the thing you go back to when things are bad. If that's the working definition you have for joy, then I think it's an okay metric if you want to look at things and like, does this spark like a deep-seated comfort in my life? Yeah, sure. If there are like superfluous things, maybe worth getting rid of those things. Sure, fine, whatever. But what we need to watch out for here in a bigger picture way is the idolatry on both sides of this issue. So on the one side, we know about this as North Americans in the 21st century. Materialism is a sin. Having things and depending on things for your happiness is a sin. It is putting something in front of God. It is idolatry. And I think this is more of the problem for North Americans. We just accumulate stuff and we accumulate money and we're never happy unless we have the next new thing or more of that thing. So we definitely need to fight against that. And minimalism is kind of a cool push back as like, God's creation is always just coming back to center, right? So sin will push it farther and farther away from center, but God's creation is so well created that even in sin, it naturally just pulls itself back to the center. And usually humans continue to push the pendulum the other way, but it's a really cool thing about God's creation that it just works that way. So there are some humans who are realizing that materialism is bad, and so they're pushing back toward this minimalism thing. But the scary thing is that we would then start to go the other way into the other idolatry, which is that I would see myself as good or valuable or right for not having a lot of stuff, right? So like I could look at another person who has all sorts of money or possessions or whatever. I see somebody who's obsessed with their job so that they can make more money, or obsessed with getting the next thing, and then I can think to myself, well, I don't have that much, and that's why I'm better than them. That's idolatry. That's pride. That's just self-justification, self-righteousness, all those things. So what you have to watch out for is that your minimalism doesn't become also an idol, right? Where you start to think, well, because I don't have a lot of stuff, I'm a good person. And I would actually say that it's not just the idolatry or the self-righteousness, but there's also the aspect of God gave us things for our enjoyment. So this is 1 Timothy says God gives us all good things for our enjoyment, literally. And that's something to remember too, that I think sometimes North Americans, we feel guilty that we have a lot of stuff. Like I've done this too as a preacher, where you get up and you'd be like, if you make more than $10,000 a year, you're like in the top 5% of all the people on earth. And that's true. And that's like something we should think about as people who have been given immense wealth. Like we should be thoughtful about how we are generous with other people who need that. But I think we also ought not to feel guilty for having that much. Right? We ought to feel guilty for hoarding that much, but don't feel bad about having a lot of stuff. Like God purposefully bore you into the world at this place, at this time, to the family that you were born into, and he knew you would have wealth. He expects you to do something with that wealth, but never feel bad about having wealth or enjoying that wealth. One pastor that I love said it really well, like, if you just have a balance between thinking about, okay, all my possessions have really three purposes. I'm either going to give them away, I'm going to save them so that I can use them at a better time, or I'm going to just live with them right now, and balance those things and have biblical principles that fall in line with all three of those things for each of the possessions or resources that I've been given. I think I'm going to have a pretty well-balanced life for the most part. So hopefully that helps. Minimalism definitely has some benefits. I think as Christians, we want to never be tied to this world, either emotionally or literally physically. Like, as Christians, we need to be ready for like the whole world to go sideways at any moment, and like everyone just suddenly starts hating and killing Christians, and we need to run. Like, that literally has happened times in the world. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but as Christians, we kind of be prepared for it, right? Like, that's kind of been the history of the church. And the fact that none of us know the history of the church is probably the reason for this. But in any case, we should be ready for that. Let's not be so tied to one area of the ground or one set of possessions that we have that we can't just give those things up. I think if you're so distraught by the thought of like your house burning down and everything being lost in it, that it gets you a little bit anxious, like maybe you need to think about that, and you need to remember about what God has prepared for you in heaven, and that these things are temporary and fading and not even close to as good as what God is going to give you when you get to heaven. And so, like, as Christians, let's remember that. Let's also remember that God has given us all good things for our enjoyment, and be happy with those things. Hopefully that's a good answer to your question about minimalism. If you have a question, make sure you ask it. My form for asking questions is on Cross of Life's website, crossoflife.net, and you can go under the Start Here tab and find Ask Our Pastor. I'll answer any question that's put into that form. God bless, and I'll catch you next time.